Hello, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining the Working Wellbeings podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
You. Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be here.
And it's been a little while in the planning of this, hasn't it? We've had a few false starts, so I'm
It has,
delighted to be
yeah.
speaking to you now.
You've been very, very patient and flexible, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Things have been quite hectic recently, so yeah, thank you very much. Glad to finally get this in.
Yeah, no worries. It was definitely worth waiting for, or it will be worth waiting for.
It
I'm
will
sure of
be.
it.
It will be.
I'm
I'm sure.
confident. So look, rather than me telling the listeners who you are, why not hand over to you and give you a chance to introduce yourself, and then we can talk a little
Thank
bit more
you.
about your role and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. Yes, so Hannah Meredith. I am a health and wellbeing lead, and I have about sort of 8 years experience doing that for a global tech marketing company. Um, Previously to that, I was sort of running wellness retreats and doing all sorts of different random things, which we'll get into more later. But yeah, I've achieved quite a lot in my role at MBF and won sort of several awards. So I can say I'm award winning, which is really nice. And yeah, I've been on a bit of a sort of 6 month break since I finished at MBF, and yeah, I've been doing lots of sort of panel events and speaking events and things like that, and opportunities to speak with lovely people such as yourself have come up. So yeah, it's been a lovely time to have a break.
Yeah, great stuff. So I definitely want to hear more about your journey and your background because that sounds interesting already. But tell me a little bit more about MVF. You said you're award winning. So what awards were? Oh well, no. Before we get into that, what's tech marketing?
Tech
What is
marketing,
that?
yeah, I suppose digital marketing. I mean, we were sort of MVF are kind of they're in between a sort of customer acquisition, digital marketing. So it's like creating content
Mm,
for our clients that customers will click on or respond to, and then qualifying those leads for our clients and selling them to businesses to use as qualified customer leads. So there was a lot of sort of SEO and kind of tech stuff as well that happened to create all of this content that went out on various platforms such as social media. And it took me probably when I started working there, I'd definitely not heard of what leads were, customer customer leads. It took
place
a
in
few.
Yorkshire, isn't it? No.
Yeah, I know, that's what I thought. Or maybe it was like cables, like electrical cables we were selling.
Yeah.
But no, I soon learned that it was this whole new space, and they've really been very innovative at MBF and kind of really sort of won tons of other awards, not just for the wellbeing stuff, but yeah, I kind of had the opportunity to start there when we were just 100 people. We
Yeah.
grew to around 700. Um, Maybe more than that globally. So there was a lot of kind of fast-paced, sort of a lot of change and things like that that happened in the time that I was there. Um, yeah, so they're very, very good at what they do, and they still are. They're doing amazingly well, I think, MBF, and
Yeah.
it was a fantastic time to be part of a very sort of forward-thinking business,
Hmm.
obviously introducing my role very early on in their journey as a wellbeing lead. So yeah, it was a great experience, and a lot of very, very bright people work
Yeah.
there and have worked there over the years. So yeah, you're always kind of learning and
Yeah, that stands out, doesn't it? You
innovating.
said that they introduced the role quite soon. That is quite soon. You know, you work with
Yeah,
SMEs, and the first 100, I always think. So who described it to me once? And they said once you get over 100, you need to start being a bit more proper with
yeah,
work. You know, below
absolutely.
100, it kind of just works. You don't need much of a HR function and whatnot. But by the time you start getting to that size, then you need to
Yeah,
start really supporting people and making some proper decisions. But yeah, to bring a
definitely.
health and well-being lead in at that stage, that's quite
Mm.
forward thinking.
Yeah, it was, and it was probably credit to, I think, I mean, the founders are extremely, I guess, open-minded. They're tech founders, they're
Mm.
quite sort of big blue sky thinkers.
Yeah.
But also my CPO, Anne Tratico, that's now gone to work at Universal Music. She sort of created the role and gave me that opportunity, and I was already kind of working at MBF in a different capacity. So I started there as part of the people team or HR team, but we like to call ourselves the people team. And yeah, sort of started in a different capacity completely, and was doing sort of talks and yoga classes and things like that for the employees already, as it's been a passion of mine, I guess, well-being, or obsession, I should say, my whole life. And yeah, had the opportunity to sort of create, well, Ange created that role, gave it to me, and I was tasked with our health and wellbeing strategy,
Yeah, yeah. And I was
which then I
reading,
had to go and learn what that was
yeah,
and what that meant. And
and I was
so yeah, it's
reading,
really been learning on the job for me.
yeah, on your profile it said that you it was the first mental health and wellbeing strategy. Is that within that company or is that within tech marketing?
Oh, within MVF, yeah.
Oh,
I've
okay, got
no
you,
doubt
got
that
you.
Google, Facebook, and other people were
Yeah.
probably, yeah, years ahead in that respect. But
Mm.
yeah, it was the first one for MVF, and only one.
Mm.
And we launched that officially in 2018.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a long time ago now. And yeah, I sort of over the years obviously evolved that strategy and refined it, and then built in ways to properly start to look at measuring it and data and things like that, which is obviously always quite difficult and can be a bit elusive in terms of sort of trying to prove your
Cool.
ROI and all of those things, as I'm sure you know,
Yeah.
because you've got quite a lot of data background, haven't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I really want to ask about that. I really want to ask about how did you measure it?
Well, initially, the strategy we set with KPIs,
Mm.
and I set that with the KPIs of kind of tracking basic things like absence, which we didn't even have a HRIS system. I think we had it for a year at the time that we'd launched the strategy, so we didn't have tons of like people data to look back on. But looking at tracking that absence data and themes of absence and things like that. And then what I did was build in questions to our employee engagement surveys around well-being. So, things like I feel my manager cares about my well-being. I know where to access resources. So then that gave us, a few sort of data points to keep looking at. But then also sort of using and looking at sort of provider data as well for anything that we had, sort of, like the EAP and things
Yeah,
like that. And we started to introduce slowly different benefits as part of that strategy as
yeah,
well. So, but yeah, in the beginning, it was, I would say, fairly basic in terms of like the data, and then towards the kind of last part of my time at MVF, I really got into building a dashboard for all of the health and wellbeing data. So that would include things like occupational health referrals, wellbeing plans, people who are managing work with adjustments, all of the provider data, which we had a ton of by that point, because obviously we've been going, for a few years. Things like, the different benefits we had, healthcare cash plan, and all of the, I guess, as well. What I did further along was set more KPIs for the strategy as well, where they actually were measuring the vision and the mission of the strategy and the different elements, or well-being modes, as I was sort of calling them then. So things like mind, move, money. I have to remember them all. Space, and there was another one as well. Social, or like sort of, yeah, social connection was another one. So within those well-being ways or modes, we had different KPIs that we were looking at as well. So yeah, it was an exciting time to be able to kind of work on that, and
yeah,
yeah, like over time, I guess, really improve and refine it,
yeah,
and just
yeah,
learn what I was doing
yeah,
in a way, because obviously I started out just kind of really finding my way as I went along, doing every single sort of course out there that there was, which wasn't many in the beginning, but there's quite a few more now out
yeah.
there about workplace wellbeing that you can do. But yeah,
Yeah, nice one. And who was accessing the data, the dashboard? Was that just yourself and the team, or were the
yeah.
exec
So
kind of holding themselves to account with that as
me
well?
and the people experience
Mm.
team would be looking at that data. And then sort of like quarterly reports as well that went as part of a larger people team
Mm.
report. So yeah, people would be looking at that data, such as like the exec board,
Yeah,
different committees, sort of responsible business and ESG and things like this as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, and obviously with all of that stuff as well, like in terms of like the environmental social governance, that well-being is really important, and it's part of that as well, and part of being a responsible business. So that data was also important for things like that as well. So but yeah, we had to sort of build it all from the ground up. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting. It's daunting, but exciting at the same time in the sense that you got a chance to,
mm,
and the chance to refine it as well. You know,
yeah,
I'm always wondering about that. I worked with a company a while back. This is going back a number of years now. And I remember they had a 10-year strategy, 10-year well-being strategy with all these KPIs and benchmarks and all the rest of it. And I've since spoken to the person who developed that 10-year strategy, and he says in hindsight he shouldn't have gone for 10 years. It was a bit too far, right? Because what it did was potentially like constrain them a little too much, you know. So
mm,
there wasn't a chance to change it as much as they would have liked, because we need to follow the 10-year strategy. But
yeah.
it's difficult because you don't want a 2-week strategy that's not a strategy. It's just
No,
you know.
I mean, I
Um,
think, yeah, sort of 3 to 5 years is good for a plan, but
mm,
then things can happen, right? Like we had
absolutely.
the global pandemic hit in,
Yeah.
obviously in 2020, and that sort of, although we were really lucky that we had a full program and strategy in place already, it meant that we went into firefighting mode rather than trying to be that more sort of proactive and preventative, which was really the ethos of the strategy. We had to then be in, as a people team in firefighting mode for
Yeah.
nearly 2 years. So, yeah, things like that can happen and make you kind of relook at completely. We didn't have a working from home culture until COVID at MBF. So we had to sort of look at how we're supporting people in a completely different environment, and, even things like DSE and all of this stuff, we had to get all of that in place. So, yeah, I think you need to be open to sort of changing it as
Yeah.
well, if occurrences like that happen.
If you need to. And it sounds like you grew hugely as well, right? So maybe a
Mm,
strategy that was suitable for an organization of 100, maybe not exactly the same when you're looking at 5 or 600.
absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
working, initially over some sites in Camden
Mm.
to working all over the country and all over the world
Yeah.
remotely or from home, in an agile way, I suppose, rather than remote. Remote isn't a very nice term, is it?
Yeah.
um, yeah, you kind of have to then adjust, and every time if we acquired a new company, obviously looking at what's available in that region and how can we extend the strategy and make it, accessible to people
Mm.
wherever they happen to be. So.
Got you. Got you. I could just ask you about that strategy for the whole podcast, but that's not why we're here. That's not why we're here. You've mentioned already a couple of like, interesting bits about your route into this role. So do you want to start
Mm,
from the beginning? How did you
my
get
checkered
started? What was your
past.
first foray into well-being?
Right. Well, I don't know if I should be ashamed, but I sort of fell into it. I don't think it's something you should shout about, but I did. I guess my passion and my purpose comes from my own experience of mental health, which is both my own, but also sort of growing up. I feel like every time I do a podcast, my mum gets a really bad rep, and I can never play her the podcast. But she, my parents were nurses growing up. They were very young, and she had a lot of mental health issues, struggling to do her midwifery and nursing and manage 3 children. Um, and I basically spent a lot of my childhood being an adult, I suppose, before I was looking after my brothers. Um, I realise now that I had anxiety when I was a child, but I definitely didn't know that. Everyone just said, "Oh, you're just shy, you're shy." And I would sit out at party games. Have, I would miss school basically. I barely went to school. Um, and mum would write me notes. Um, and obviously my anxiety undiagnosed got worse as I got older. And then I spent a lot of my sort of 20s in a very, very unhealthy relationship, when I was battling like extreme mental health issues myself. And then I finally got a diagnosis just as I turned 30 or just before, which was life changing for me because I finally sort of started to understand why I was like I was. um, and that there was help and there was ways that I could manage this anxiety. Um, so that was obviously, yeah, kind of at the time when I also left this relationship. It all kind of happened as I turned 30 and started working at MVF. But I guess I'd always tried to, my whole life, I've been very obsessed with sort of nutrition and, running sort of retreats and all these different kind of ways to try and make myself feel better, I guess, and feel healthy. But yeah, I guess it's the benefit of hindsight where I can kind of look back and go, actually, that was anxiety I was dealing with, but also I was dealing with a lot at home when I was a child as well. And sort of having to, yeah, sort of, I guess I wanted to help my mum because that's my personality type. I'm a helper. I want to support people, and that made things easier for me to miss school, to be home running the house. And I didn't want to be at school either because obviously I had anxiety. But it's obviously only the benefit of kind of years of getting my anxiety is much more manageable now. I'd say I barely suffer. Like I definitely suffer with mental health in a different way, and it's very sort of up and down. But I'm fortunate that it's not like crippling anymore. And the diagnosis that I had, I've had like years of therapy, I've had coaching and medication as well at one point. That has really kind of helped me. I've got a lot of like coping strategies now.
Yeah.
I'll stop because
No,
otherwise I'll go on and
thank
on and
you.
on.
Do you know what? Thank you so much for sharing. And I know it's a little, I don't want it to sound patronizing, but we need leaders and people who are willing to share these stories and be open about this sort of stuff, right? Especially if you're in a position where that's the sort of thing that you're working with other individuals around and with organizations. You need to have that level of openness and authenticity yourself, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I couldn't really do it any other way. It's just, I guess I've definitely felt like a total imposter in this
Right.
job, but I think that's common, probably whatever job you're doing. I think people have that. But the fact that there wasn't really like a blueprint for my role when I started doing it, and I was given a lot of autonomy and a lot of trust to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, Ange saw that in me at the time, but I'm so grateful because I do feel that it is my purpose. And I think having this kind of 6-month career break as well from finishing at MVF really has reaffirmed that for me, that it is my purpose. It's what I'm here to do. And I guess, yeah, sometimes you just need that kind of reflection time as well. It was a big journey at MVF, and it was a hard one at times.
Yeah.
And it definitely took its toll on me, being that support for other people. And we had to kind of build into the strategy later how I'm going to be supported if that's my role, and things like making sure line managers are trained, so that not everyone was coming to me, because I think not everyone understood what my role was. Am I just there to be, a counsellor or a mental health first aider?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a real journey, and yeah, it's taken, I think, probably until now to feel like I fully know what I'm doing. I fully know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm not embarrassed to say this is why. It's because of my own, my own journey. And and also I've got that experience
I
work-wise
don't know whether
to
you
back it
agree,
up.
but I feel like that's kind of a part of a failing or a risk in the industry more generally as well. So one of the things that we created the Working Well community to do, and this isn't a plug, it's just because this is what we did and this is what I'm passionate about, is almost like legitimizing that role, right? Look, I'm not for 1 second saying that every single IT director or finance director or whatnot, that I meet doesn't suffer from any imposter syndrome. Of course they do. But because there's more of a laid out, well trodden path of what you should do and the qualifications you should take and all the rest, you can be more confident of, I'm here for a reason and I've got this background and all the rest of it. Whereas with wellbeing roles, often they start with a blank piece of paper, and there's not necessarily that same route that you should take through.
Mm,
And you mentioned kind of taking courses earlier. There's no recognized qualification
yeah,
necessarily that you should take, and the benefit of that, I think, is that it brings innovative thinking, and it means that we've got people who aren't just cookie cutter. You know, you don't want to go
yeah,
that far, but the risk is that, yeah, it could lead to some of that imposter syndrome that you talked about just there.
definitely. I think so. And I think, a lot of the time I see people do get into these roles because of their lived experience, but then, yeah, there's no sort of the danger with that as well is obviously not having that, I guess, proper toolkit or knowledge and experience in terms of, officially what you should be doing. And then not having those boundaries and it taking a kind of effect on your own sort of well-being as well, because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of passion to do these roles, because you're also having to not just be there for or put in place the support even for everybody else, but you're also having to convince people a lot of the time why you have to be there and why it's important,
Yeah,
because not everybody is on board.
yeah, I
um,
got you.
and quite often it's the first thing to be cut, as we're seeing recently, huge cuts, where there's redundancies and things like that. Quite often well-being is one of the first things to go, and it's seen as a nice to have still for some organizations, some sectors. So yeah, I still think it still can be a bit of a slog, and it can be hard, but it's also so rewarding, when you're able to work and do a job that aligns with your own purpose.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. That, we've talked and we've asked, and I can ask you as well, although you've mentioned a few already, like the skills and the attributes required to be a good well-being leader. I think that passion and purpose piece is almost a prerequisite, right? You've got to have an interest. You've got to have an interest in this
Mm,
stuff to do it justice, and
definitely.
potentially even that lived experience as well. You also mentioned the importance of influencing just there, being able to influence those around you. There's probably something
Mm.
around like motivation and keeping yourself going and innovation. Is there anything else you'd add to the list in terms of those attributes?
I think, yeah, sort of the influencing part is key, and actually being able to use data to sort of back up,
Mhm.
your why or your business case, or whatever it might be that you're needing to kind of convince people of. Fortunately, since I started out, there's now are some brilliant courses.
Mhm.
Um, and there are, I guess, a few more frameworks out there, and there's quite a lot more that you can upskill yourself with, I guess, um, which is great. But I still think that we need to get to a place where there is sort of, I don't think it needs to be an official, degree style qualification, but something with, CIPD, which there are there's sort of 1 day courses with CIPD that I've done, but that sort of gives you an overview, and you get a certificate and things like that, but it's actually something where it's a bit more, exam, back and forth,
Mm.
and you get sort of tested on it, and
Mm.
it's giving you a structure that is industry wide as well. I think we
Yeah.
need kind of, um, an accepted framework that works across the industry, and is, yeah, it's just making sure that strategies are not just perks and you know nice things,
Yeah.
and benefits. It's actually the reason why you're introducing those things, and what's the plan behind it, and what's the data to suggest that you
Yeah.
need that particular support or benefit. So yeah, I think, we need to still get to a place where there's that sort of industry standard.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There seems a lot more talk around that just
I
recently.
think
I
so.
feel like I've been banging that drum for 15
Yes, I've
years.
seen
I'm
you
not saying
talk.
I'm responsible for it, but there is a lot more people talking now about the importance of things like psychosocial risk measurement and the
Yes.
whole data piece. Even going back to so I did a psychology degree, and in
Hmm.
my psychology degree there was quite a lot of data, and an oxpsyc MSc there was quite a lot of data analysis. I think more than I
Yeah.
was expecting, and certainly more than some of the people on the course were expecting. But I was very lucky that my background, so my dad's an engineer, my brother's an engineer. I did
Hmm.
maths and physics
Oh,
at
we
school. I was,
love numbers.
so yeah, so I've got a background in that area, and it was something that came relatively naturally to me. But I do think that's, if we're talking about where the industry goes in the future,
Mm,
those agreed frameworks and better use of data and all these sorts of things, they've got to play a part, right?
definitely. And I think you're right. Obviously, in recent years, we've seen, the legislation change around health and safety to include stress, and mental health as well.
Hmm.
So that is obviously is having an impact.
Yeah.
But I guess it's the framework within how you use that to as part of your strategy as well. Um, yeah, but I think hopefully there is, yeah, as you say, a lot of kind of talk about it, and it will start to change, and we'll maybe start to see something where someone official sort of launches a course. There is a brilliant course that I know about, but I won't plug it.
All right, all right. I feel like
I don't know if I should. It's
I
my
don't know.
mentor's course, Amy McCowan. She does do workplace health right.
Yes, yes, yes.
I don't know if you want any ads in here.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
I've
it's
come
really
across
good, and
that.
she's sort of talking about the framework as well, and it's a great one for wellbeing leads.
Yeah.
Because I think she noticed that kind of gap as
Mm,
well, that there isn't really anything, but hopefully places like CIPD will start hopefully doing things like that as well.
yeah, yeah.
Because you're HR adjacent, you quite often it's HR people teams that might get into doing this role, but you're not really there to do the sort of actual HR stuff. So yeah, hopefully that organisation will start to launch a course soon. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely think uh, it's patience around it as well, isn't it? I'm always
mm,
impatient because I want these things to happen overnight. So, for example, with the launch of the ISO standard 45003 in, was that June 22, something like that? I thought the day after, all of a sudden, every single
yeah,
organization would be like, right, we need psychosocial risk. And now I'm mentioning it 2 years on to companies, and they're like, ISO what? What are you talking about? So, yeah, I guess these things take time, right?
it does, and I think what is probably happening is organisations are doing them on more of a reactive basis. So they're doing the
Mm,
stress risk assessment with individuals when they need to. I
yeah.
mean, I'm sure bigger organisations are, because when you do your health and safety assessment, you
Hmm.
have to do a psychosocial one as well now. So yeah, I'm sure that is happening in bigger places,
Yeah.
more established places for sure.
Yeah.
But
And when you say that, you mean a proactive stress risk
yes, in
assessment?
a
Yeah, yeah.
proactive way. Sorry, yeah. So the way I sort of use them was more in a reactive way at MVF because we didn't even quite have a health and safety policy, complete yet. That was
Mm,
something that was being worked on. So we would use them in the stress risk assessment in an individual reactive way for people that that needed it, that were experiencing
mm,
issues at work or issues with their manager or mental health issues, things like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I've got you.
Yeah.
But you think organizations could be using those on more of a widespread basis?
Yeah, I think when you're actually doing your health and safety policy now, it's not just about the physical health and safety risks and things, it's actually
Yeah.
looking at things in a proactive way from a psychosocial way as well,
Mm.
and job design and things like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Again, music to my ears. Yeah, definitely. We should definitely be doing. So I
Yeah.
was going to ask you about who's kind of helped you along the way and advice that you've received. And you mentioned one individual, right, who obviously saw some potential in you and
Yeah.
and gave you that autonomy. Has there
Yes.
been
I
any
don't
other
know how. I
moments
feel
or
like
advice that you've
Angie's
received
is
along the way?
psychic or something, but she seems to be able to sort of see things in people.
Mm.
Yeah, she's obviously incredible. She's, yeah, as I said, gone to Universal Music, so she's going to be doing wonderful things there, no doubt. But yeah, I guess I've always had so much self-doubt over the years as well. So I've had a lot of sort of coaching and mentoring and things like that, and yeah, it's definitely I feel like it's worked now, but
Mm.
I think it's always a journey, and there will still be more improvements that I that I can make on myself. I will feel, but Yeah, lots of support from friends and family as well has helped. Like my husband's been amazing at supporting me over the years. And just believing in me, I guess, when it was hard to believe in myself or feel that I, was doing a good job or um, yeah, and I think what's really important as well is actually that network, and that's why this community is so amazing because it can feel very siloed doing the health and wellbeing role. I was within the people team, I was within the people experience team, but then I was responsible for a whole function myself, and I didn't have anyone to sort of ask or soundboard with. People just trusted that health and wellbeing was taken care of, so I was doing, I was responsible. And yeah, having that, just that industry peers, I guess, and having that support, I think is amazing. And I wish that this community had existed, when I was starting out, because there weren't many people that I could sort of talk to. And yeah, just confide in really and have that, reassurance. And that's why, I mean, I'm, excited to be in my next role going into a team as well, because I think you can learn so much from others, and that's really important. And I think it took me a long time to get to where I've got to because I was working in a very isolated way as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um, um,
yeah, I'm really excited to learn from others
yeah.
in my
And
next role.
partly there, you're just mentioning about the confidence, right? It's not
Yeah,
necessarily you need. I mean, I'm sure you will
definitely.
have picked up technical advice and skills from other people along the way, but a big part of it's just, those harder to measure aspects, self-belief and confidence, and because it's scary, especially if you're the one person looking after well-being within an organization and it's something that you believe is such an important topic. So a huge weight of responsibility to just shoulder on your
Yeah,
own, right?
it is, and it is funny because also, yeah, it's just that sort of self-doubt about, well, I think to be honest, I felt like it took the COVID pandemic before people were like, oh, that's what you do. I thought you just organized yoga and
Yeah.
massages for everybody. And it felt like that was when it sort of started to be taken seriously,
Mm,
even though people were so engaged with it. MBF people loved it. We did so much amazing work sharing our mental health stories, and people really appreciated it and were engaged in it. But I think there were still a lot of people that thought I organised yoga and massages.
yeah.
So even that, it's like, how can I have confidence in what I'm doing if other people aren't even sure what I'm there for, or
Mm,
what's the point of the role, sort of thing. So because you're still trying to convince people a lot of the time. So yeah, it would have been amazing to just have people that got it, even just to say, yeah, I understand exactly what it's like, and yeah, just have that peer support. I think
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm convinced we'll get there. I'm convinced we'll get
Yeah, I
there
think
because,
so.
like you say, although when budgets go down, then sometimes the wellbeing roles can be the first to go. Personally, I'm biased, right? But I don't think that will continue, and I think that there are enough organisations out there that take this area really seriously, and they
Hmm.
will outperform the ones who don't, and that will
Yeah,
be it, right? It will be that's how business works, and you know, I feel like we need to get to a point where it's taken as seriously as that. It's just the patience. It's just the patience.
mm,
I'd like that to have happened already, if I'm perfectly honest. But it
yeah,
hasn't quite. But we're miles on from where we were 10 years ago.
yeah. I definitely think so. I believe that. Yeah, the businesses that are going to do well, like you say, are going to be the ones that are investing in well-being and health at work. Like we've got so many challenges that businesses are going to have to face in terms of, I mean, in the obviously the cost of living crisis, the healthcare failing, all this sort of generational stuff that's happening as well. Like the future workforce and the current workforce, like millennials, Gen Z, they are. This stuff is like vital to them. It's super important that employers care about them and about
Mm.
their well-being. And yeah, I think how businesses are going to support sort of like several generations that are in the workforce now as well. And there's so many health factors that come into to different age groups
Yeah, to
and things
both
that people
ends.
are
Yeah.
having to deal with. you need a strategy to deal with that,
Mm,
So yeah, so I really hope so, and I believe that it's going to still be important, but
yeah, we'll
for
get there.
businesses.
We'll get
Yeah.
there. We'll get there.
We have to
So,
have hope. We have to believe.
so we were talking about the importance of confidence and self-belief and all the rest of
Mm.
it. And hopefully you're over the imposter syndrome by now because I'm going to ask you a different type of question. What's gone wrong? What's gone wrong
What's
along the
gone
way?
wrong?
So, no. So, what challenges have you faced? Have you made any mistakes along the way that you think, do you know what? I'd have dealt with that differently if I know what I knew now? Um, any examples of that?
Oh, it's everything. I literally, I mean, the benefit of hindsight, right? But I, I guess perhaps making the mistake with the initial strategy to do a bit too much too soon.
Okay.
I think it could have been simpler as a
Mm,
strategy, and I guess, I mean, it's difficult because we didn't have the data then, but now if I was doing it again, I would have started more with that sort of the framework as to what we're trying to. I mean, we started with our why, which was proactive and preventative, and trying to give people the tools to
yeah.
prevent, illness and stuff. But I think it would be more, yeah, building a sort of proper framework using data initially. But obviously, we didn't have much to use at that point. But yeah, things have moved on since then. In terms of things that have gone wrong, I think I'm lucky to say not much. I've been able to manage some very tricky, difficult situations for the business and for employees, and sort of walk that line between what's best for both, and try and get to a really good resolution where the employee feels seen and heard
Yeah.
and respected, and managing risk for the business as well. So I've been really lucky, but I think situations that could have been better would have been like sort of looking at risk assessments for people where they've got health conditions. Perhaps not, we weren't collecting health data for employees at MVF, so building that in sooner so that we
Mm.
actually were able to support people from day one with health conditions that they've got, rather
Yeah.
than waiting till we find out about it because they're struggling or their
Yeah.
health condition flares up, that sort of
Mm.
thing. Um,
And do you feel people were happy to disclose those things?
um, I It's funny because I've actually had to complete something like that myself recently, and I found it really intrusive. And I was like, "This is weird. This is obviously what we need to do." But I was like, "Who's going to see this?" So it's so much detail about my
Mm.
health. But I think the way that we tried to do it was more in a, if there's anything that you want us to know and that you want us to support you with, you can let us know, sort of via this, HRIS system. But um, yeah, I think everyone's different. Some people have, yeah, everyone has a different level of trust, I would say, with
Yeah.
employers in
But
general.
but then I guess it's building up that culture of psychological safety within the organization where people feel like if I disclose something, it is not going to be held against me. It's not going to
Yeah,
be. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think once you have that culture, and especially this is why line manager or people manager training is so key, because they're the ones that are going to be probably disclosed to, like
Mm.
by their, in their one-to-ones with their teams, what if anyone is struggling or has anything that they need support with. So they kind of really need the tools to handle those conversations,
Yeah.
um, and also to know where they can get support for their teams, and what's available to them as well. So they don't need to have all the answers in terms of knowing the complex health issues that people go through, but it's just sort of being able to handle that sort of those conversations, I guess, and where to signpost to support,
Absolutely.
how to manage adjustments for people. Um, so yeah, I think that is really key to
Absolutely.
infuse that
Absolutely.
culture across the organisation.
Yeah. Sorry, just going back to something you said before. I should have asked it at the time. You said you went too fast too soon with the strategy. What does that mean in practice? What do you mean?
I guess I'm such quite a creative person and quite a visionary, I suppose. And we had all of these, yeah, we had like five well-being elements,
Yeah.
So for me, I was like very into the fact that, and I still am, that well-being can be accessed can mean something different to everybody, and it can be
Yeah.
accessed in so many different ways. Like some people don't want to go to a therapy session or do anything to do their mental health, but physical health is how they really connect and feel good. And it might be that actually social connection is something for people that is key, and if that sort of isn't optimal, then they'll be struggling or they'll start to feel unwell. So I really wanted to sort of build in and reflect that, even
Mm.
things like our space and our environment, and how office design can be a massive contributor to how you feel when you're in a space and how you feel about well-being.
Yeah.
And we managed to kind of achieve a lot of it, I would say. Like we had amazing offices designed with well-being kind of at the heart.
Hmm.
Um, but I do believe all of that stuff is really important. But I think looking back, it would have been good to go like, physical, mental health years 2 to 3,
I got you.
and then kind of look at the other stuff later, because it's a lot to do at once for one
Mm.
person.
Mm. I really love that. I'd never really heard it articulated that way about um, people almost have like their own language around well-being, right? And access it
Yeah, I think so.
in different ways. Yeah, I really love that.
Definitely. And some
Yeah.
people are really, they're really stressed out about going to the office or being, and it's noisy, and they can't have their routine, and some
Mm.
people get really depressed if they're at home, like me. If I'm
Mm.
just at home, I need to see people, I need to be connected and having conversations,
Yeah.
even if it's not people I'm directly working with, just, people around the office. Yeah, but everybody's different, and I think COVID really, really highlighted that, didn't it, for
Yeah.
everyone?
Yeah. It increased empathy. Increased empathy because it's
Mm, yeah,
even for me, I'm like background in psychology and I do this day in, day out. But sometimes, when you're under pressure, you're like, I find this easy. Why don't they?
yeah,
So I'm the opposite to you. I really don't mind working from home. I'm fine. Like I've got
yeah,
2 kids and don't mind hanging out with them in the day and all that sort of
yeah.
most
Well,
of
you've
the
got
time.
company next time.
Most of the time. But so yeah, it can be difficult to empathise sometimes if someone's desperate to get back in the office. You're almost like, why? But
Mm.
yeah, everyone's different. Everyone's different.
And we had to open a space when we were legally allowed for essential office access for
Mm.
some people who couldn't they couldn't work from home. They
Yeah.
were really struggling, and we wanted to, MVF. They what I saw was the exec board and everyone really having that empathy. All of a sudden, it was like everyone was kind of in the same boat, and it sort of leveled, I think, things out for people. And they wanted to do as much as they could. So we had, a space that we opened up
Mm.
for social distance office access, just so that those people, or they had building work going on next door, or they just didn't have a space, they're working in their bedroom.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really tried to kind of put those different supports in for different people
Yeah. Yeah.
over that time.
I love the way you described it. Like they can't. Do you know? I wrestled with this a lot during COVID in particular, and without going back into all of that again.
I
But
know it feels like a bit of a lifetime
it
ago
does a
talking
bit.
about
It's such
this.
a
It's quite
strange thing.
surreal.
Such a strange thing
It's
to
like
have
four
happened.
years. It's 4 years ago,
Is it?
isn't it
Wow.
now?
Wow. But the
Scary.
but the so I felt like empathy did increase, but there were pockets of it that you just didn't see, and I thought it was very indicative of some of the stuff I see in organisations as well. So, for example, I would see headlines come out about how these evil, reckless students were meeting one another and having parties during lockdown. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were some people who shouldn't have been going and having big parties and all the rest of it. But this inability to almost put yourself in their shoes and be like,
Mm,
so it's easy for me to sit here with my house and my garden and all the rest of it and say, how
yeah.
dare they go and meet one another? But they're literally sat in a 1 bedroom apartment or a halls, and they're in an environment that they don't know anything about. They don't know, they've got new friends who they're trying to forge new
Mm,
connections with, and they want to go and hang out with them for a bit. And yes, in one sense, it was against the law at one point. They shouldn't have been doing it,
yeah, I know.
but like you say, they almost had to. They almost
Yeah,
had to,
because
and it's
some people
and
couldn't
and, and
cope with.
I didn't want to, I wanted to empathise with them in that sense. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it was a crazy time, I think, for for everybody, and I think everyone just kind of coped with it in the ways that they could and tried
Yeah.
to just get through it. And I think it wasn't easy for anybody, even if you had a nice, a big house and a garden, that
Yeah.
everyone had their own stuff, that they were dealing with,
Absolutely.
homeschooling or whatever it might be, with their kids. It wasn't an easy time, and I think the more that we can kind of just say, like, okay,
Mm.
let's have some empathy for what other people are going through
Yeah.
is good. So hopefully we learn something. If anything, God forbid, ever happens like that
Yeah.
again, we can be a bit kinder
But
on
but
each
even
other.
within organisations, I think those sorts of things can still be helpful. That we
Yeah,
think of an
yeah,
organisation going through a huge transformational change and redundancies being made. It's probably felt in a similar sort of way.
yeah,
The
definitely.
amount of stress that people are under, and if we come at it with kindness and empathy, then it's probably a good starting point, I guess.
I think so. Yeah,
Mm.
and yeah, building empathy within an organization I think, is really important, and psychological safety as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, very important. I think it goes a long way to making people feel valued and
Yeah,
engaged, and
yeah.
want to stay with you.
Definitely. Well, look, the time has flown by. I can't
I know
believe
it
that.
has
I
flown
can't
by. When
believe
you
that's
said
the time
about
already.
40 minutes, I was
Um,
thinking, oh, there's no way I can talk for 40 minutes.
no, no, no. So just before we finish off, was there
Yeah.
anything that you were kind of hoping I would ask you that I've not? Was there anything that you?
No, I mean, I honestly, it's funny. I didn't prepare anything. Obviously, it was just a chat, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's been nice to speak just really openly and honestly about everything today. So yeah, I've enjoyed it. But no, nothing, nothing
Okay.
I want to plug or anything.
Yeah. Enjoyed it too. Enjoyed it too. We'd love to
Yeah,
stay in touch. And if people want to hear more from you or contact you, where do they find you, Hannah?
you can find me on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I also have a website that's going live soon,
Hmm.
hannahmeredithwellbeing.com. So yeah, look out. I'm speaking at the water cooler event. I'm not sure when this will be going out, but yeah, speaking at that in a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm usually about at these industry events. So please come and say hi if you spot me.
Yeah. Nice one.
Always good to see a friendly face.
Yeah, yeah.
Do
I'll
you
tell you
guys
what.
go?
We'll try and get this clip out before the water cooler because we're there as well. So we're at the water
Are
cooler.
you?
Yeah.
Oh my
So it'd be
gosh, you
great
get
to
to meet
see
in
you.
person.
It'll be great to see you in person, and we've got a podcast booth as well. So if you fancy doing another podcast,
Oh, that's
2 weeks from now,
amazing. How exciting. Have
yeah.
you got people coming to do it on the day?
Hopefully,
Yeah,
hopefully, yeah. I
great.
hope so. I
Yeah,
hope so. I didn't know
amazing.
you were
I'm definitely
talking there. We could have done it in person, but thank you so much for your time today.
No
It's been
problem. Thank
fascinating
you.
listening to the journey that you've been on and the work that you've done. I will definitely, keep abreast. I think of some of the work that you're doing because it sounds really interesting. And
Thank
any
you.
future roles that you might be moving into.
Hmm.
Um,
Watch this space.
but yeah, so thank you so much for your time, and we'll speak to you again soon.